You ever found yourself in one of those arguments? You know the one. You lay out what you think is just undeniable proof. We're talking court documents, direct quotes, maybe even video footage. And the other person, they just dig in even deeper. It's maddening, right? Well, today we're going to unpack the actual science behind why that happens. So, really, how can two people look at the exact same piece of evidence and walk away with completely opposite conclusions? The answer, it turns out, isn't really about being stubborn or ignorant. It's about something much, much deeper going on inside our brains. I mean, this slide just lays out the whole puzzle perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the hard evidence, and on the other, a reaction that seems to defy all logic. Pure anger, denial, or just trying to change the subject. So what is causing this massive disconnect?
To solve this mystery, we're going to do something a little different. We're stripping away all the political chatter and we're going to look directly at what peer-reviewed behavioral science has to say. We're basically on a hunt for the psychological blueprint that builds and defends these two totally separate realities.
Okay, so this is the crucial point to get. We are not just talking about someone making a conscious choice to ignore the facts. No, we're talking about a deeply wired, almost automatic neurological process that kicks in to protect something the brain thinks is way more important than just one little piece of information. So, what even sets the stage for this kind of intense, unshakable loyalty to a single person or a single idea? Well, social psychologists have actually found some really specific personality traits that can make a person more likely to think this way. Okay, so researchers have zeroed in on two big ones. The first is right-wing authoritarianism, which is basically a preference for order and submitting to authority. The second one is called social dominance orientation. And let's dig into that second one a bit more. Social dominance orientation. I know, it sounds super academic, right? But what it really boils down to is this hidden belief that society works best when it's structured like a pyramid. It's this idea that there's a natural order, with some groups meant to lead and others meant to follow. It's not necessarily about hostility. It's more about a deep desire for a clear, predictable social ladder. So what happens when someone with that worldview starts to feel like their group's spot on that ladder is slipping? That feeling, researchers call it relative deprivation. It makes them look for a very specific type of leader. They're not looking for a politician who wants to collaborate. They're looking for an enforcer, someone who promises to put things back in their rightful order. Right, but that brings up a massive, glaring contradiction, doesn't it? What happens when that enforcer they picked does something that completely violates the supporter's own moral code? How in the world does the brain deal with that? I mean, this is the moment, right? This is where logic is supposed to step in and say, hey, wait a minute. But instead, the brain pulls out this brilliant and honestly kind of terrifying defense strategy to stop an internal meltdown before it even starts. And that whole strategy is triggered by something called cognitive dissonance. And listen, this isn't just a fancy psychology term. It is a real, measurable feeling of psychological pain. It's like a mental alarm bell, and the brain absolutely hates it. It will do almost anything to make that feeling stop and to make it stop right now.
So the process is actually simple, and it's lightning fast. Step 1, a fact comes along that challenges a core belief. Step 2, the brain feels that pain of dissonance. And step 3, like an immune system for your ego, it launches these emergency countermeasures to neutralize the threat immediately. And these are the actual countermeasures that researchers have watched people use in real time. First up, absolute denial. Nope, the evidence is fake, it's all made up. The second is a classic, whataboutism. Yeah, but what about what the other side did? And then there's the most amazing one, rewiring values. A person who always said they valued morality might suddenly decide, you know what, morality isn't that important in a leader. They will literally change their own rulebook to keep the original beliefs safe.
But hang on, because there's a twist here. You might assume that this kind of fierce loyalty is driven by a love of chaos or disruption. But recent science, it found the exact opposite. Yeah, just look at this quote from a recent study. It is fascinating. When researchers dug into the personalities of the most die-hard political loyalists, they didn't find chaos at all. They found extreme off-the-charts levels of conscientiousness. That's the personality trait linked with order, discipline, and self-control. This chart just says it all. The difference isn't small, it's huge. For this core group of loyalists, that drive for order and structure is just worlds apart from the general population. So their loyalty isn't chaotic at all. It's actually a highly organized, very disciplined response to what they see as a major threat. And what is that threat? Well, psychologists have a name for it, the threat to optimal distinctiveness. That's the fancy way of saying it's the profound fear that as society changes, their traditional cultural identity, the thing that makes them feel unique, is being erased or watered down. And so that leader becomes more than a person. They become a symbol, a shield protecting that identity.
Which brings us to the final and most important piece of the puzzle. We've seen the personality traits, we've seen the brain's crazy defense strategy, and we've seen the underlying fear. So now let's put a name to the powerful mechanism that ties this whole thing together.
The ultimate answer is something called identity protective cognition. This is the point where a political choice stops being just a choice and it actually fuses with a person's core identity. It becomes part of who they are. And at that moment, the brain's prime directive switches from find the truth to protect myself at all costs. This is the most crucial takeaway of this entire explainer. When you present your piece of evidence, their brain doesn't file it under new information to consider. Nope, it files it under attack. An attack on their group, an attack on their values, an attack on their very sense of self.
And here's what's literally happening inside the skull. The amygdala, that's the brain's ancient alarm system. It completely hijacks the whole system. It lights up as if you were a lion in the grass. And in doing so, it basically shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's in charge of logic and reason.
And so, to them, admitting they were wrong about their leader isn't just about admitting a simple mistake. On a deep neurological level, it feels like an act of self-destruction. Doubling down isn't a political strategy anymore, it's a survival instinct. And that leaves us with a profound and frankly very difficult question. Understanding all this psychology is a huge first step, but if facts are seen as attacks on our very identity, it forces us to rethink everything we know about communication and about how we might ever find common ground in a world that feels so divided.